You able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I think yesterday we were talking about table, etc. Responsive table, and we have seen how to use like different uh, levels of data as such, right? So this was our output, and this is where we stopped in between. So here one important thing to understand here is like, so binding of different levels of data, we have to make sure that to check the how we are accessing this data. So in this case, we have used mtable and directly what all the fields which we are binding it. So on the main set D results, this path which we are trying to map they are directly available. Whereas in order to map the sub-level items, we need to make sure that we are following the binding path as well correctly. So in this case, we have company name, etc. as the binding path. So if we go back to our application, so we have given business partner set and we have expanded it. And so we are trying to map them with customer ID, etc., company name. So in this case, for the fields which are falling in the second level, that means two sales order. So if you see, we have a path called two results sales order, and then results we have it. So we have to make sure that we are having fully qualified path we are trying to present to it, right? So for regular company name, etc., we can follow this path. Whereas for this one, we have to pass two sales order, then results followed by the sales order ID, etc. Right? So because we are having a different path, so how we access this level? So if we have to access this straight away this level, we can directly bind company name, etc. And we could got mapping. Whereas for customer ID cross amount, which are second level data, we are not able to view the data because the way they are structured in the service. So in the Postman, if you see, we could see that in D results, all the data fields are we are able to see, but not the fields which are mapped for under the second level. So in order to access, we have to use this fully qualified path. So two sales orders, then results. If we use, then we should be able to get. So in order to use it, we have to for regular fields we can pass as direct fields, but for the other fields we'll pass as two sales order results slash results. Right. So if you see here the path, whatever path we are trying to get here, so we have to try to replicate the same. So two sales order, and then within results we have this is an object. Within the object we have again result set. Within the result set we have the respective fields. So all these fields are part of this particular one. Okay. So let's see if we are able to. Nope. So let's see if we have any issue. Says list entity of a path could not be found. Okay, smart asset. Okay, I think the syntax which we have tried to bind itself, right? So it's not able to read, second level of data. So we have slight version of C within this. This is we call it as complex binding. So there are like two different approaches are there for binding it. If the system is not able to understand, we can use one more syntax. Just so we have. So here it says automatic determination of expand and select. So I think okay, this is V4. In V4 we have a different thing. We have to check on V2. Sec models V2. So the syntax etc. They slightly change for V2 model and V4 model. So they're like very uh, minor changes itself. I'll explain what changes are there as well.
Mm.
So this we are currently what we are using is V2 model. So I have to select V2. So the one which we were saying was V4. V4 we use some expression binding. So that is like a slight variation of it. So this here, this is how the create or CRUD operations. How do we use using OData? So these are the basic methods we have in V2. The way we use OData CRUD operations in V4 is slightly different. So the methods also got changed completely. So those we'll do it in one of the exercise. We'll compare side by side how we are doing in V2 and how we are doing in V4. Yes. Text style in V2 is slightly different. I'm just trying to. I think one called walkthrough expression finding. Yes. So we call this as also as these are part of we have different binding syntaxes. So I'll just explain that. I'm just trying to make sure we have right structure. This is controller. Okay, they have you. Okay, fine. If not, there's a keyword I'm looking for. Let me try to correct it. I'll give it a shot. Okay, sort is not required. I think it is. So for this path, actually there are like different syntaxes are there. So for the expand, we have to specifically use. I think this even the syntax which we tried is also fine, but there are like different versions. They try to read it in a different way. So the way it is trying to understand runtime, we need to check. I think it says as not qualified, so it's not able to understand that path. So we are trying to recreate it in a different way. Okay, so this is one typical syntax. Try and check on it. So we have to same binding. Whatever we see in the JSON payload, we have to try to match the same syntax in a UI. So we are trying to what we are trying to do is the business partner expand to two sales order if we have it. So we have a different way of informing that. See, this is the level of two sales order, and it has to try to recognize that um, deep inside the level what we have. Now, when we try to access within this sales order, if we try to access two business partner, again there is a slightly different way of trying to access. So we need to clearly distinguish between how do we access different levels of data. So in this case, this would be our first level of data drill down. Again, further from sales order, if you try to go to two business partner, it will be our second level of drill downing of data. So we need to inform the runtime that this is the path we are trying to refer to. So how do we define it in the UI? So we have different syntaxes for that. So that specifically we need to try to use correct. Then only the system will be able to understand. Let's see if it's able to recognize. loading. Yeah, I think it's still loading. So it's network type generally when if it says as any of the file is pending, we'll come to know. So
Mm.
even this 200, 300, these are like server status. The request we send to server, right? So what
Mm.
happened to the server status? These numbers will indicate. So 200 indicates it's a success, and 400 indicate like they're like a category of errors. So 400 is like just for not found, etc.
Mm.
So 304 it's like not modified, etc. So they're like majorly if there is authorization error, we'll have 403. If the server is completely down, it will be 500. So these are the some of the ways we can identify what went wrong.
Mm.
We clear the cache. It's taking. Double check it. I think something it's not trying to load the application. There is no error as such as well here. These are not actually errors. Okay, let's check if here also there's no errors. I think there is no error as such, but I'm strange. It doesn't respond as well here. Okay, let me double check myself. Responsive table. I wanted to make sure that we are not having any um, response. Okay. I think it has to do with the syntax. I think when I'm trying to use expand set, it's not able to recognize and it's not trying to load.
Mm.
Yeah, yes, 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 yes. Okay, okay. Syntax error. Okay, that's okay.
Did we close the comma? I mean the quote.
Oh yeah, I think this is missing. Right. I think maybe even the previously that might be missing. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. So this is working fine. Only the syntax to do with the second level, there could be some issue because of it. It's
Mm.
not able to understand. Let me quickly, we have one in the response table. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I think we have path. So all the references we have are V2 based bindings only. So we have
Mm.
certain references out here. Okay, all are like in the first level data they are using it. Okay, fine. Let's not waste our time. So I'll just recheck this syntax. So if not, we'll give it a one more try. Let me see. Maybe it could be wrong from my end itself. So there is one more way as well. We can do in multiple ways. So one is, the whole data, if we have uh, loading all the data in a model, then binding the model directly to our view. So in this case, I'm trying to map it directly. uh, it's like all the calls are directly going to the server. There is no, I mean, we have the OData model, so I'm using server side model, so we can use a JSON model. What happens in case of JSON model is we'll load all the data, whatever data we have, everything will load it and we'll place it. I think it's true with error, so it says it's not able to recognize this particular syntax. Okay, expected comma syntax. Oh, fine. Okay, I'll.
It says like somewhere we put like parameters and then colon,
Correct.
if,
So
curly bracket open and expand and then
yes, I
make.
think this additional parameters, there is some. Generally, we can fall back to this OData dodge. Let me check here. So here we'll have what we call the sample cases where we'll try to understand the structure. Let me check if we have one. Okay, I think no, we is okay. Here they haven't given any example. Generally, we have an example here where it shows different when we are trying to use it. So they'll give some illustration like how exactly we have to use different types of parameters here. I think for X1 they haven't illustrated the parameters. Fine. This is just a small binding syntax. We need to use the right if way to call the second level and third level data. Once we know this, in general, how we use this is how we use the path. So to sales sort and results is a further path we have to map it. So we have to correct this particular syntax exactly. Then we have to change the qualified path even for the field as well. So this each property customer ID, it resides inside this path. So to sales order then results. So it's like accessing this particular object path, right? So we have to provide this path, and then once we try to give it, it should automatically fetch and show us the data which is available on our other columns. Okay, fine. For now, let me uncomment this, and we'll. Okay. So here we have we are trying to understand that we have different levels of data, and we can try to map all the tables data, different levels of data on the main screen. Okay, we'll try to resolve that. So further to it, to understand more of M features, what technically we can do is like we can go back to our API reference and we can look what all it offers. Okay. One way is to through samples. So samples will illustrate us few features, etc. And in this case, I'm directly going to M table as well. So in M table, we can directly check for properties, events, etc. So here we have something called alternate rows. So from 1.5 to we have it. So I'm just trying to add couple of properties to it. So alternate colors, it just adds some to distinguish the rows from each rows, light shade of gray, etc. Just try to add to it. So if you see, there's a slight white and gray kind of combination. So based on the theme, it automatically we'll be able to read the data. If we are following a row, etc., it will be easy to follow. So it's just a cosmetic way. Yes. Yeah, auto pop-in mode is one feature where for overflow we use. So it says so auto pop-in in mobile specific. I'll just explain those things as well. For the mobile, if we want to hide certain column, how do we hide, etc. So for that we have to add few more parameters. So for that we call it as we have to specify device parameters, etc. So once we specify it, then we'll be able to control whether it has to hide or it has to show, etc. So to show that as well, what we'll try to do is we'll add few the toolbar. I'll try to add few buttons. So to show the workflow behavior as well. So here I'll search bar, we have it. try to use some export option. So okay. I'll try to add few buttons for now, and let's so so in this case, all these are like events which we'll be writing on our function block. So I can say any name. So you can use some icons as well. We can add to them, and these are like standard way of adding some features for the table. Generically, what all sorting, filtering, grouping, these all features we generally add. So these are like organizing the data. For organizing data, we be using it. So so these are like standard snippets which we try to reuse in every application. Like Excel kind of what are they doing it? It will not for M table. It will be different. So we have to give explicit filter option, etc. So column wise, we will not be having those filters, etc. So I'll just try to explain. So we have a few features like if you see ascending, descending, we have to filter the data, and then we can group based on some category. And if you want to hide some columns, etc., we use personalization as hiding for certain columns, etc. Whereas grouping is about all the products which are from this particular company, like depot for all, so we can group them into one category. So all the data from this particular depot for all will be grouped, and export is like exporting the data. So these are the basic operations which we give along with the search. So search and export, sorting, grouping, filtering, personalization. So these are the common characteristics across all the tables. So for M table, these do not have inbuilt, whereas in grid table we'll have this inbuilt. So we have to ensure that we are trying to give them these features as well. Okay, let me check if okay. Yeah. So by default, we can enable the search. So we can enable all these features, and then we can use how that features change from device to device as well. So I'll go here. So let's add the search logic first. So in order to introduce search logic and other features, we can go back to here. I think we have by default the template also creates some method. If it doesn't, we have to create one. Okay. I think it has automatically created one method itself already, right? Yes, yes. So this is a standard SAP. In SAP, what we use is we use something called filter. So SAP.ui.filter is a library which is like this is a model. If you see for the JSON model, OData model, everything, all the model lies in this particular library itself. What we try to do is the OData model directly this particular library called filter and filter operator. What they do is they try to refine the model data. So whenever we search the data, they'll just this OData model supports by default this particular filter, etc. operations. So we have to pass the property which we are trying to search, and we have to pass it the value as such. So in this case, whatever we are entering it here, we'll compare it with which property we want to search for. So in this case, with company, we are trying to match results. So we have to just make sure we are using the right keywords. I think these libraries are already loaded. So here it is just checking whether if it is pressed or not button. Refresh. Check. Okay, that's a binding. Okay, no issues. So here, this logic, simple logic we need to understand is just this particular two lines of code, where we just created a variable called table state, and it's an array. And what are we entered the query value. So this is like, these are standard parameters. How these parameters we need to try to use the right parameters. So we'll go back to API. Sorry. So in the M field, if you see, so they're like different libraries as well. So we are trying to use M library search field itself. So in this, we have to go for the methods. Okay. So in the method section, we'll have yes. So the constructor section, if you see, we have something called ID, etc. I think search method, right? So here we have used search event. So there are like different events which we can use. So one is live change, etc. So live change is the moment we type keystroke, we'll have it. So in this search field control, if you're trying to use this particular event called search, so under the events we have this. So certain properties, if you're calling it, so we have to check for what all activities we can do in this particular method. So this method is like inbuilt method in the search. So when we are using search event, we have something called get source and get parameters. If you see, it says that in order to read the input field, we have to pass a key called query. So if you use query, then we'll be able to extract the input field. So in this case, if anybody is entering any value, so the search event, so we have used the search event called search as event. So if you see, we have used search as event. So this is the event name. So the moment we click on search, when we are going back to our search logic, so in order to extract those data, each events will have different parameters. We need to refer to API. So in the search, it's in this case, it says the O control event is nothing but our function. So here, whatever name you give, that is called as the controlling event. So using this function parameter, we can access all the properties of this particular search event. So one is get source we can use. Another is in get parameters. In this case, we have query and suggestion item, whether the refresh button is pressed or not, whether we have to clear or not, etc. So these are the couple of parameters we have. So in this case, we are trying to use query in order to uh, get the input value, right? So this has to work straight away. There is nothing change required. Let me. So what we'll do is we go back here. We'll search for on search. So we'll place a breakpoint. So they have used get parents or refresh button pressed, whether refresh button is pressed or not, or whether queries, whether we are able to read a query or not. So this is how we'll use API to understand the activity of each event. So some events can have a drop down box. If you have a drop down box, you have multiple values, and which value is selected, you have to find it. In that case, we'll have a parameters called whether it is selected or not. So we'll have get selected, etc. So we need to see, and we cannot use whatever parameters we need. Based on API itself, we will be know which parameter to pass. So just like from UI, how we pass for these methods, we have to pass the right query right parameter. So this parameter, in this case, it is query. In some other case, it could be selected, etc. So we need to understand from the API. So based on the event, always the path would be event, and from the event we have to try to check. Now I entered a value and I try to clear it. Now it comes back here. So how do we place breakpoint is you have to open mm, the this is our work list view, and corresponding work list controller. We have to first select control O, and then we have to select for work list control. So when we select this, each of the function using control F, we can search for those functions. So here I have searched for on search, and you have to click on the leftmost side. So when we place a breakpoint in this way, we can see the flow of events. So in this case, I'm just trying to understand what value we are getting it, and whether is it comparing with company or not. Okay. So you see the query is blank now, and only when there is at least one keyword we are asking it to enter to this loop, it comes out of this loop now. So let me enter office line. Oh, office. Let's check. So we haven't given in any refresh button itself. So this logic doesn't make any sense. So we are able to read the office using a query. So we whatever input was there, we're able to read the query. Now technically what we are doing is we have taken an array called table search, and within this array now it comes back into this, and we are trying to filter this list using which property. So we are using this property, and we says whether if it contains, so they're like filter operators, many operators we have. So these are the operators we have, whether all, any, between contains, whether it is exactly equal to. So these all operators we can use. So these are the such combinations which we can enable for this particular field. For the company name, now currently we are using contains. If it contains this keyword, then we are trying to add it to the array, and then we are trying to filter that list. So this is how we are writing the logic. You're getting it right. So in this case, it tries to compare it this way. So value one is office, and operator is contents, and the path to refer to is company. So if this combination is right, then it will be automatically sorted. So now we are able to sort the data based on which are matching with office. If you see the record contains we have used. So if we use contains, it directly matches wherever we find it. If you wanted to exactly equal to, like if only with office etc, if it is there, then we have to. So the logics how we change is like based on the operator which we have seen, right? So different operators. So we can control the behavior. So if it matches exactly etc, in that way we can try to refine it. So let me redo again. So in this case, starts with, if I use starts with, so only the starting keyword which uses, and it brings us exactly results which are required. So in this case, what I'll do is in order to have accurate results, I'll use starts with instead of contains, and exact match equal to. So that's how the search we can play around. So we cannot have a robust search like how you use Google etc, but these are like model based search. So the what our search we are doing is based on the see v2 model has different container capabilities, v4 has different capabilities. So this is like v2 has these provisions, you're getting it. So v2 model, OData model, so we this all are like where we haven't specified any model, right? So we have the model resides in manifest itself. So we'll always uh, already all our complete application is directly bound with that OData model. So all we are using is OData model itself. So here we have already defined OData version as 2. So all the service parameters which we are using are nothing but OData protocol, and only 2 will be applied. Even the syntax why I was trying to specify is, so we have to specify to use v2 based syntaxes, and for v4 we have a different syntaxes. So we have to, even when we try to define in the controller, we have to make sure that we are OData v2 properties etc itself we are trying to use it. So that simple correction we have to keep checking it. So in v2 we have these all filter operators etc, and this model supports these different kinds of such capabilities. Okay, I think so. Yes. So we can, because we are sure of this logic, what we can do here, you can expand here. There is a section called, first it will be on watch, then you have breakpoints. So on the right click, you can always, deactivate the breakpoints. And if you want, again, you have to enable, or you can specific breakpoint also, you can enable and toggle, etc. And you have to play around with this console area, because each variable, whatever variable we are storing it, everything we can using console area. So this escape keyword you can use it. If you type escape, the console will appear. So escape is a shortcut to open this, and we can use this as a direct your you can any JavaScript coding snippets we can how to try. So we can try it here. or you can directly, what are variables we have used here, we have used o event, right? So o event, what all methods it has. Now if you see, I have mentioned about these are like standard methods. We have used get parameters, get source, etc. These are like, this is an event. For this event, these are the methods I have said. So this in the programmatically, how do we view? So from API, if it is, sometimes API documentation may not be updated, and it may be limited with only few methods. But in the programmatically, how do you view is, so in this event, if I check in the console scope, so it shows me all the parent class methods here. So event has lots of other methods and functions. Okay, so here if you see, o source is nothing but get source. So get source is a method which tries to access this particular parent node. So in this has lots of other methods we have. So we can always use these methods to construct required data, etc. required in that logic. So most of the time we try to use API's standard methods, and certain cases when we do not have, we are not able to access. See, that is like we have, what in the view we have it, we should be able to access in the controller programmatically. If we access programmatically, then only we can play around with some other logics and we can refine the data, right? So in this case, office data, I just trying to do it. Let me just show you the output first. So here now our search results are accurately, they are appearing it. So previously it used to match all the records. Now everything which starts with it, so it's accurately loading. So we are fine with this. But there will be cases when you're trying to manipulate the data. So programmatically, you need to access certain methods. Only then you can perform desired functions, etc. So then we have to use these approaches where yeah, I think toggle off the breakpoint. I'll just enable one. So how do we? So I'll just try to access. So in this case, we can type as this way event, and the same structure. Either you can drill down here, or you can use the this particular interface as well. So event dot when it says this node, as we have different nodes, right? So this we call it as DOM structure. So DOM structure, every node we can access is this way. So parent in this case is event. Further way, which are the tree structure we want. So m parameters o source. So we can use. Uh, so this is how the syntax we use it. So for this simple logic, we did not get the need to access the complete tree structure, but always certain times we have to use, for in case of combo box, etc., selected value, etc., if we need, we can access the tree structure in this way. So if you, in this case, if you, you want to pick certain features of the UI, in this case, if you check for M properties, the placeholder, if you want to dynamically change the placeholder. So you have placeholder is nothing but if it is empty, it has a keyword called search, etc. So if you want to change that dynamically as well, so entered search parameters incorrect, etc. Suppose some error warning we want to display, and instead of showing it somewhere else, we can place it just inside the placeholder itself. So how do we do it? So you can use this particular tree structure. In this case, I have something called m properties, and that I have a placeholder. So I can simply use this syntax in this case: o event dot o source dot m properties dot placeholder. See, so we are able to reach that node. So what we are trying to is programmatically we are trying to insert in see this whole browser is a DOM structure. DOM structure, when I say, it will be like in this case like a tree structure. So in the tree structure we can directly manipulate the data, etc. in the DOM structure. How do we manipulate? Using this particular by accessing the parent structure. So in this case, the parent structure has this path. So the placeholder is placed. So it could be placed in multiple tree structures. Sometimes the same duplicate can be available in other tree structure as well. So anywhere we can modify, and it across all the places it gets updated. So this is also an example of classical inheritance. So at one place we modify, it gets across the DOM objects, it gets modified. Now I can set the value to uh, So in this case, I'll set value 1 with value current. Entered value. Entered search. Entered incorrect search. Incorrect search. So now I have set this value as this way. So we can programmatically change the structure of it, and then think many such keywords I have to toggle this breakpoint off, else how many of such results we have, all it will be activating it. Let me disable this. It's lost at the short. Okay. So now in this case, it will be lost. So we can use this way and we can set the value. So dynamically when we set instead of such, it will show that entered such values incorrect, etc. Okay. So we can use API's methods, or we can use the programmatic way of accessing the DOM structure. So this writing for certain logics, we will be requiring all these approaches um, in order to effectively handle this data. Okay. Now such has been corrected. We'll try to use export logic. So for export logic, I'll try to add fallback logic. So we have two syntax approaches. One, let me go back here. So export logic also, there is like we have two different approaches library. In the responsive table, they use something called if you see here, there's an export logic here. So the export logic used will be here of export type CSV library. So there are like different libraries which are handling the export functionality. And this is one of the older approaches where they use it in order to automatically extract the tabular data into this particular Excel data. But here if you see, it is not organized, and this has to be again organized further. So this has to be reorganized, and we have the tabular data. So this is older approach of accessing data, exporting data. But these are all standard logic. Once we set, we can reuse them for all the applications. So here the approach uses export to CSV, but this is older approach, and we have some newer approach. I'll suggest the newer approach as well. So all they used was export to CSV library. So this library they're using this library. So they're like different libraries. We can use it, and in this case they specify this is a logic they are specifying. So on data export is a function they have written, and they have used export type CSV library, and all the data they are mapping the model. So which OData model data they have to export, that model they are exporting, and the collection name and the columns they are specifying it. So then using this logic, they are able to export the data. If you use the same logic, we'll try with both approaches. I'll show one newer approach as well as the older approach. In this case, we can take the snippet out here, and at the end, I'll try to here we have to just construct this particular. We have given the name as on download. Okay. So we have to let's load those libraries as well. So in this case, I have libraries. We'll try to master basic functional. Then I'll give you standard ways of doing as well. So always make sure whatever you are adding the library, define a parameter here. So only then we'll be able to access these particular libraries within our program. So I'm just trying to load these libraries. So these are like two libraries which are required for exporting a file. So export to CSV and export type CSV. And we have defined a method event called, in our case, we have defined an event called press event. So I said on download. So the moment I click on download, I have to, it comes and it, tries to execute this particular block of code. So here we have to, we are trying to use export type CSV, and we are saying CSV always has comma separated. So in this case, the separator we are using is semicolon. We are asking it to use. So you can set it to default to comma also, or whatever you want separator, you can set a separator. If you're using the separator, then we have to make sure that whenever you're filtering the data here, in the delimited value, you have to select as comma. If you're using comma there, you have to use comma. If you're using semicolon, you have to use semicolon, right? So this is one thing which we have to try to understand how export type CSV works. So this is a CSV library. So it's always the each block of data has to be separated with some delimiter. So first value and second value, whether it could be separated with semicolon or comma, we have to specify. So if I use any of this, if I use, I can make it separate. So in this case, I use you can use comma or semicolon as separator. And we have the model data. I'll use our collection. Yeah, business partnership. And this is like in the Excel table, we have the columns, right? So we have to construct these columns in this case. So in order to construct these columns, what I try to do is I'll try to construct these columns. Um, so we have given what are names we have given here, right? So we can construct the same. So I'll pick the columns names from here. Company name. Sorry. Hope you're following, because this is I'm trying to explain the like generic logics which we use. Like such, we will not have an advanced logics. We won't write anything. We'll use inbuilt framework provided methods, and similarly export also we'll use inbuilt libraries. We have some inbuilt libraries called export type CSV. For the search we had filter, SAP UI.model.filter. Now in this case we have export type CSV as an inbuilt method. So we are trying to use our inbuilt methods, and how do we use the inbuilt methods to get the desired functionality, we are trying to understand. And I have tried to explain in such how the different methods we can use. Similarly for export type CSV, now we are trying to see what are the different methods available to it, and how do we inform the framework that this is our data. So all we are informing export type CSV is, see, this is our separator and this is our data. Our model data is available in, you can get the model and you can set the model data. And this is the rows path we are trying to set. And now we are trying to set inform it that these are the columns available. So we are trying to map uh, for the Excel as well. So we say company name, etc. So I'll just quickly add upon. Yeah, use created it. This is a label how it appears in Excel, and this is how the binding would be. So same in this is like in controller, we are trying to have a syntax available. Customer. I can use a simple structure here. Right. I think we have one last field, gross amount. you notice here, so there are like different syntaxes used. So if you want to show two different fields like amount and currency code in this case. So if you want to show amount and currency, so we can because two fields if you have wanted to use, so we can use two codes side by side. So how if we place it the both the units side by side in the Excel as well, you'll get it this like 4.2 kg how you got 956 euro you got, right? So this way we can place two curly braces and we can two fields we can place it side by side, and then whatever field in Excel, it appears in two fields or data fields will be shown as a single field in your Excel. So this is one typical syntax they'll try to we'll try to use it frequently. I think this last entry is not required. Okay. Okay, see, if you see, notice, I think this is the logic we have written. There's nothing too big about it. So we are using an export library and we have loaded the export library, and then you use export type CSV. These are like parent and child classes. So these two are important. So export and export type CSV, we have defined it. And then we are trying to pass all we are trying to pass is the model and then the entity set which we have to use in the different columns. And finally, it has save file. So if there is an error, if you see again, this is a self invocation function. If there is an error, it will throw error, and afterwards, then it will destroy the whole DOM tree structure. So this is the how the simple logic has been used. Let's see if it works. So we have our data, and so I was able to download. Let's see if we have the data here. So if you see, we got our data, right? So we are able to export it. So we can check the data and we can double check if we are, if you see gross amount field, I think we got only the currency code. And I think there could be either incorrect match of our syntax. So we can cross check always like gross amount. I think, okay. So because a gross amount is available on the this particular structure, so we weren't able to bind it in the view. So if we have bound it correctly, then even it will be able to read this particular path. So in the view how we have defined it, we have to same way in the control as well, we have to define it. So once we define it correctly, this particular field will be readable. So you're able to follow, like, I mean, these are like standard methods. So we are trying to understand how do we use these standard libraries. So we load the libraries and how do we tweak, and we have to play around with.
Yeah.
These are like very easiest way of handling it. So this all the standard functionalities are like um, the models, etc. Using models itself we can achieve. So these are like standard logics. So for every application we'll use export logic. We'll use every application we'll use such. We'll use sorting, grouping, etc. So I'll try to add all these features tomorrow, and then I'll try to show you a quick walkthrough. So when this I'll try to look back the right parameters, etc. So now we try to see two logics. So there is one more improvised way. So this export logic which I said is very old way. So there's a new syntax available as well. Now let me tomorrow I'll just show you, but just I'll explain what I'm trying to talk about. There's something called spreadsheet is a new library. So previously we used this export type CSV, right? So now there's a new library introduced. I think it was introduced in 1.7 or so, etc. Where if you see here directly, it uses a different utility altogether. The moment I export the same data, so it gives some how many data it is here, and it doesn't require any comma separate, etc. So one of the key difference here is we need not to manipulate the data. So automatically it comes with built-in sorting, filtering, etc. And the data would be automatically organized. The key difference is we need not to use CSV. So this uses XLSX format. So if you see the file type for the previous file, it is .csv. Okay, so export type CSV uses .csv extension, whereas a spreadsheet uses directly .xlsx. So most of the spreadsheet utility applications it's recommended to use XLSX. So there is one key difference. So if you see the language here, for CSV, we have to use UTF-8. So UTF-8 is for if you wanted like other languages. So in this case, Chinese, Japanese, etc. So unless you save the file in UTF-8, export type CSV will not be able to read this particular other language, non-English characters, etc. So for that, UTF-8 is the character set. So like the same file, if I use, I'll just show you what I'm trying to talk. So I'll save this file this way. So I use some, okay. These are a lot of different languages altogether. Okay. I try to save this, and if I save this, uh, these file data will not be read by the program. Okay, because it doesn't understand. So in order to read any languages, so XLS has inbuilt capability of because it uses UTF-8, and UTF-8 has all the characters. See, any language, if you use regional language, you use all the known languages across, so are supported in XLSX. Whereas in CSV, it non-English characters are not typically understood. So for if you wanted to use CSV approach, so what we have to do is you have to save this file as if you see, it says as CSV UTF-8. Okay, so here if you see, there is a regular CSV and there is one more called CSV UTF-8. Because I had different language, it automatically picked up as UTF-8. So we have to always use CSV UTF-8 itself. By default, it will use CSV comma delimited. So if you save the file in this way, and if you try to store the data, so the data will not be viewable. Okay, but that problem is overcome in spreadsheet utility. So we use spreadsheet utility when you are having a scenario where you're having non-English characters, etc., how to be exported. Then your export type CSV. The problem is they have to always ensure that they are uploading the UTF-8 file itself. And either you have to do a UI check saying that if the file does not have UTF-8 format, then you have to prompt user to re-upload UTF-8 format. But in case of Excel, we need not to think anything, and any kind of language they can provide and we can export it. So that's the key difference between the old library export type CSV and spreadsheet utility. So tomorrow I'll try to use this. Uses a different approach. Like here we have something called different syntax altogether. So I'll try to explain this method, and we'll try to use this new method as well. And right now, let me wrap up with um, some more features. Table. Yes. So I think we have checked for few properties here, and there are like the parent class, we have the list base, so all the properties of list base also we can use it. So I'm going to the parent class, like I have explained previously, like we can make use of all the parent class library features as well. So we can make this if this wanted to make this each row currently it is single select, etc. This is no, it's just single select, so each row we are able to select one at a time. So in order to add multiple selection, etc., so we can have to say, use this property called mode. So this is how the behavior is completely controlled. So this is important. So if you see the modes, so we have different modes here. One is multi-select or delete, none, and single. By default, it will be none. If you see here, the property is none by default. So if none looks this way, and to enable single select, if you set to single select, etc., we will get a radio button on the left, and then user will be able to know that he has to make an action. So if you want to sort, etc., we need to have at least this particular behavior. So I think there's a property single select left. We have to use single select left in order to make this come at the left. So this is a very old one, list mode. So we can go to list mode. We can click on here. So we have single select. So here they have in the description they haven't given all the list. So this also again sometimes the API may not be very updated. So after this, what we call, So, okay. So here, if you see, it shows only the like example in this case, only four it has detailed. But maybe after this, it has been documented. There like some more were introduced. So if you see here, you will find more than the description shows. So single select master, single select left. So if you use single select left, uh, so it doesn't make sense to have it on the right. Um, so we'll try to use instead. If you use single select, that's how. If you use single select left, it appears on the left. So to perform all our actions, we have to use this mode. Only then we'll be able to sort, filter, etc. Right. So if you see the difference, um, previously, if you are selecting it is going to the row. But how do we do filtering, sorting, etc.? So in order to do this, we have to have some mode, right? So we'll select this row or anything, or we can select any specific item, and we can say that group by this particular item, or filter by this item, or filter based on etc. So we can specify certain actions, etc., buttons, etc. So specific things if we have some action to the left, right? So this is single select.
Thank you.
And delete is one typical use case which will really help us to do.
Can we stop here, or do
Yes,
we
yes,
need to?
yes. No, 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 we can stop here. So tomorrow we'll reach a bit. So just this modes, this is how it will appear. So we can give this interactive way. So the table M features we are trying to explore. So this is how we can have delete, etc. So most frequently we'll use multi-select and single select, and delete is also we can use it. So how we get default, see by default, how do we provide this rich features, etc. We are just trying to understand. Fine. Tomorrow I'll wrap it up all these features, etc. And we'll try to see the new approach of export, etc. And we'll try to see all the other standard attributes, etc. Right.
Sure.
Fine. We'll meet tomorrow. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.